So, what if the reason your brand feels a little bit invisible right now isn't because you're behind, but because you're actually perfectly caught up? Caught up on automation, caught up on answer engine optimization, SEO, caught up on AI, caught up on the best practices that every other competent team on the B2B internet has downloaded, the same playbook. What if the real risk in 2026 isn't being inefficient, but being indistinguishably efficient? Because here's the tension we're all kind of sitting with. When everybody can generate something impressive in seconds, why should anybody care that you did? That's the question that changes everything. So we spent the last few weeks dismantling the old B2B playbook. First, we diagnosed what I called the brand's beige wall, the thing that we've all hit. And then we explored the plural brand, where we move from room to room, community to community, and telling different stories to different people. And then we leaned into the pratfall protocol, where we showed our vulnerabilities, our pointy bits, as I called them. And now we arrive at the question, well, your CFO, your board, or maybe even your own inner skeptic is already asking, okay, well, that's all interesting, Robert, but how do we operationalize this? Like, what actions do we have to take? Well, let's talk about that. So for more than a decade, B2B marketing has been obsessed with the idea of efficiency when it comes to our content and brand storytelling. We've promised frictionless journeys, automated touch points, scalable conversations. We've redesigned our websites to remove every ounce of effort by the buyer. We've measured success in seconds saved, clicks reduced. And for a long time, that kind of felt like progress. But something subtle has actually happened here. You see, when a prospect starts to hear and see things like automated solution, do more with less, our approach saves you money, click for a demo, better ROI today, here's our thought leadership, they no longer hear innovation or differentiation. They hear table stakes. They assume speed. They assume AI. They assume ROI. They also assume that whatever you can do, somebody else can do just as quickly. Logistics optimization, for example, that once required a war room can now be approximated by a clever script and a prompt. A strategic marketing audit that used to take weeks can be generated into a respectful-looking PDF before lunch. Manufacturing precision, once a generational craft, is promised by any facility with the right robotics vendor. Now, whether your product or service is actually truly excellent, your brand, your product, your service is really excellent, which I'm sure it is, well, that's another discussion. The important point is that for most, the signal of effort has vanished. The cost of producing a B2B brand that looks competent in its entirety has collapsed. And when effort becomes invisible, so does trust. In cryptocurrency, and boy do I understand the irony of using crypto as an example here anyway, but there's a good metaphor here. In crypto, there's a concept called proof of work. You see, a network only trusts a new block because energy was expended to create it. Resources were burned. Work was done. That cost is what makes it credible. And in B2B today, showing the human effort in our content and our brand storytelling, that is becoming the new proof of work. Now, proof of work. When we think about that for more than 2 seconds, the first instinct many teams might have when they hear this idea is, well, panic. I mean, are we supposed to slow everything down in our content and our marketing operation? Are we supposed to show how we make our product harder to use? Is this just a sophisticated argument for inefficiency? No. Or, well, the answer might be actually maybe. But the goal is not to romanticize chaos. No, the goal is to place effort strategically. Most B2B brands are currently confused about where that effort belongs. They try to make the relationship lightweight and the transaction heavy. So for example, we ask buyers to fill out long forms, wait for demos, navigate opaque pricing, while simultaneously claiming to be effortless partners. The result is this weird, strange contradiction. The marketing feels polished and automated, while the buying experience feels bureaucratic and slow. If we can flip that dynamic, something interesting starts to happen. When it comes to relationships, trust building, storytelling, perspective, effort should be visible. It should feel deliberate. It should feel specific. For example, a CEO who writes 50 thoughtful emails to key prospects communicates something very different than a 5,000-person email blast, even if the latter is technically more efficient. A small unrecorded dinner for 10 customers creates a different kind of memory than a massive webinar replay. Some of these new brand content operations don't scale cleanly. That is precisely why they start to signal commitment. That same applies to the content we create. A generic blog post that checks every SEO box might perform adequately, but an in-depth interview with your lead engineer about a painful trade-off in the product roadmap, that might carry a different weight. When you tell the story of internal debate, when you let people see that decisions were wrestled with, you are demonstrating judgment, not just output. So for example, I know one very sophisticated computer engineering company that is developing some great traction with a piece that talks about their own internal struggles to master AI implementation. That signal shows that they are just like us, trying, learning, and rather than looking like a weakness, it shows that there's probably something that we can learn from them. Judgment is scarce. At the same time, once trust is established, the mechanics of doing business should become almost invisible, right? Pricing should be clear, contracts should be straightforward, utility should arrive quickly. If someone is ready to engage, the path forward should not feel like a scavenger hunt. There's a simple heuristic that I've been using. If the interaction requires empathy, allow it to feel substantial. If it's administrative, remove the burden entirely. That brings us to a larger shift. Moving to what I would call, well, from a black box brand to a glass box brand, or really just another attribute of what we might call a plural brand. Historically, B2B companies have hid the messy middle. Clients saw the polished strategy deck, the final software release, the finished manufacturing spec, the sketches, the false starts, the heated debates, the abandoned prototypes, all of that stayed behind the curtain. The final deliverable appeared as if fully formed. But now that AI can produce those impressive deliverables in seconds, the mere existence of a polished artifact may no longer be as impressive. The value increasingly resides in being willing to show the thinking that produced it. When you share the whiteboard session that preceded the white paper, you are signaling that real cognition occurred. When you publish a behind-the-scenes conversation about why a feature was delayed, you demonstrate trade-off awareness. When you sit openly with a team and whiteboard it all together and openly discuss a product bug, how it was resolved, and how you reveal, you're not claiming effort, you're showing it. That is scalable not because you work more hours, but because you let people see more of the hours that you're already working. The proof of work is not theatrics. It's transparency about the labor, the thinking that already exists. So, if we zoom out, the arc of this series on the new plural B2B brand storytelling becomes a bit clearer. We started with the beige wall, the realization that infinite competence has flattened differentiation, distinction. When everybody sounds professional and polished, professionalism stops being distinctive. When we introduce then the plural brand, the idea that instead of broadcasting one monolithic message to an abstract market, we create specific rooms or visit specific rooms for specific audiences and tell them specific stories, plural, numbers of stories. Then we layered on what we called the pratfall protocol, embracing selective vulnerability, getting pointy with our message, because in a synthetic environment, perfection often reads as artificial. And now we land on proof of work. In a world where generation is cheap, effort is expensive. And expensive signals might help us carry more meaning. That's all in how we choose to operate with our content and our marketing and our brand. It's tempting to look at AI, automation, and the sheer volume of content being produced these days and feel kind of cynical about it. It can feel kind of like the walls are closing in on B2B marketing, and in a sense, they are. The walls are closing in on lazy positioning, on interchangeable messaging, on the comfortable assumption that sounding smart, sounding intelligent, sounding like a thought leader is enough. But for brands willing to let their work be seen, for leaders willing to trade a little polish for a little honesty, trading our humanity, well, I think the opportunity is pretty significant. The future does not belong to the companies who automate everything and smooth everything out. It belongs to companies that automate what is mundane so that they can invest in disproportionate energy in that which is human. That shift requires courage. It requires restraint. It requires a willingness to show the thinking, to be a bit inefficient, not just to answer the question. And that is precisely why it might create advantage. Just remember, it's your story. let people see the work, and then tell it well. I'll see you next week.